The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Thursday. I'm very excited to be here with you today. We're going to be with you live for the next 2 hours talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. I make this little circle because I think of all of us in this big, wonderful community, and everybody has different circumstances. Everybody has different places in which they intersect with other people in the circle. And I really want to be clear that here at Autism Live, we want to be able to bring you all points of view. And that means that from time to time, people aren't going to agree. And, you know, this is a big spectrum full of people. A lot of times people think of it as a line. I'm thinking of it as a circle. We're a world, we're a community. And I think it's so important to be able to look at this in lots of different ways. So if you're a parent, teacher, practitioner, or a person who's on the autism spectrum, we know you have a unique insight into this world, into this community, and to some of the challenges that you face. There are lots of interesting things in this community. There are things to celebrate. There are lots of things to celebrate, and there are lots of hurdles to jump over. We want to help you to do all the things that you want to do. So having said all of that, Emily is going to cycle through some of the different ways that you can get in contact with us here at the show so that you can put your voice forward. We want to hear from you, know what you're thinking, what you would like to see on the show, what questions that you have. We have some great experts who are going to be on the show with you, and you're going to want to talk to them. So while Emily's showing you all the different ways you can watch the show and interact, I will remind you that if you go to autism-live.com, that's our homepage, you can watch the live show there or the most recently recorded live show. You can also check out our blog. We have a great meditation for overwhelmed parents there on the site right now, on the blog site. But you can also, on that first page where you're watching the live show or the recently recorded live show, you can utilize the live feature. You see those boxes that are off to the side there? One will tell you when I'm answering a question that doesn't have things in it that I need to delete, I can post it there for you guys to see. Below that is your question. You put your cursor there and you can start typing, hit enter, and it shows up here on my screen. There's about a minute lag we seem to be getting. Some days it's a little bit more, some days it's a little bit less. So we encourage you when we have a guest here to ask your question early in the interview, right? Because otherwise it takes a while. If you're wondering, you know, you say, I sent in a question and she didn't answer it. Sometimes I don't get it until the guest is out the door. I cried yesterday. Somebody wrote something for Dr. Doreen that I would have loved to have asked her this last week, and it didn't come in until she was, you know, fully out of the studio. So we'll ask it next week, right? We cycle back through the questions, but ask your question early. Now, here's the other key to this. We don't know who you are. When you go and you type and hit enter, remember there's no login. We have no idea who you are or where you are at all. And isn't that great? And it's totally free too. But you have complete anonymity to be able to do what you want to do and ask the questions you want to. I don't know about you. I know there's no stupid question, but sometimes I go, oh, maybe there is, you know, and I get afraid to ask, like, maybe this is a bad question. But you don't have to worry about that. You can ask your question and not have to worry about, oh, somebody's going to say, Beth, why did you ask that question, right? But if you want us to get back to you, if there's something that you say, hey, I want to know information about this, and you want us to email you back, then you do need to include some way for us to get back to you, because otherwise the only thing I can do is talk to you here, right? And if you do include that personal information, we will not share that with the audience at home. We protect your information like it is our own, and you know what that's like. So I hope that you will participate. You may notice that I've got CAN written on my hand. This is part of the campaign that we're participating in here at Autism Live, and it's gathering steam. We got a lot of other organizations that are coming with us on this. On April 23rd of this month, we're asking all of you to write CAN somewhere on your person. If you watched yesterday, you saw that Nancy and I had it written on our forehead. Funny story that happened to me later on in the day, that someone thought that I was being abused because I had something written on my forehead. But it opened a conversation, right? And that's what it's all about. What CAN stands for is Coverage for Autism Now. And to remind us that we can make this happen, right? Coverage for Autism Now. We want to stand in solidarity with all of the families that are out there who don't yet have coverage or can't afford their coverage for whatever reason. For those families that have Medicare, or in the state here in California, Medi-Cal, which used to cover ABA, doesn't anymore, we want to stand with them. For the families who, because their insurance is self-funded under ERISA, they don't have to adhere to the laws. We want to stand with them. For the folks in South Dakota who recently their reform bill was defeated, we want to stand with them and say, we see you, we hear you, we want coverage for autism now. For those of you who have insurance, but your copay and your deductible is so high that you haven't figured out how to meet that deductible, and so you're still not having access to Coverage for Autism Now, we want to stand with you. So on the 23rd, write it somewhere in your person. If you don't want to write on your body, I get it. Put it on a t-shirt, put it on your hat, take a picture, send it to us, so that we're going to make a mosaic of all these pictures about the fact that we can, and remind these families that we haven't forgotten you. We haven't forgotten you. We are so very not done yet. So that's what that's about. And I have it on my hand every day that we're here doing shows this month to remind me that we can, together, we can do this. Okay, so that's what's going on here. We like to start the show with something. Oh, and one other thing. I always like to remind you guys that we have experts on the show. We have two amazing experts who are going to be with us today answering questions. But very important that I remind you, I am not an expert in the field of autism. I sit here and, you know, I pretend that I'm driving the bus. Really, it's Emily who's driving the bus. I'm like the tour guide. That's what I am. I'm exactly the tour guide. Who will point out some interesting insights, you know, but I'm not the expert. I am a parent who, my son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. You know, wasn't my most favorite period of time in my life, because I spent some time spinning my wheels trying to figure out, what are we doing? How can I be of service to this child? How can I be the best parent of a child on the autism spectrum so that I don't get in his way and I move obstacles out of his way? Well, we got answers, and we got help, and we got support, and we had resources, and it was because I just got stinking lucky. And I want you to be lucky. So that's why I'm here, to help connect you to the things that you want to be connected. And I gave up mind reading to be an autism mom, so I don't know all the things that you want to be connected to, so that's why you got to tell me. Just tell me what it is that you're looking for, and if nothing else, I can be a supportive ear, but sometimes we can help and connect you with resources to get your questions answered. I just don't want you to feel like you're alone in this, because I know for a fact that you're not. And I welcome you here, and I welcome your knowledge here. So, but I am not an expert. Every day I'm running to catch up with my own keister in this community for all the things that I don't know, but I'm learning. I want to be a good student. All right, so we like to, speaking of being a good student, we like to start every morning with something that we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym, and we try to make sense of what it means in our world. What are we really talking about? How is this phrase, this word, useful to us? And I don't know about you, but sometimes the jargon, especially when we get into alphabet land. When you start talking about education and you get into alphabet land and they say, well, oh, it's maddening. They'll say, the IEP and the FAPE and the, right? I just want to throw up. I feel like it's deliberate, and I'm a former teacher, okay? I feel like it's deliberate sometimes to segregate and keep people from information. I hope that that's not the case, but I feel like I think the initial reason why they came up with Alphabet Land for education was to make it quicker. But in fact, what it does frequently is it alienates people from information. It's the education field. Why would we keep doing anything that alienates people from information in the education field, right? Why would we do that? But they do, and they just add more and more to the alphabet land. As parents, it is so essential. If you're a teacher, forget it. You have to delve into alphabet land or you're lost, right? As parents, we have to delve in just enough to understand how we have to be effective as advocates for our children. And that's really important, right? We could never minimize that role. We have to make sure that we step up. And we've been talking about today's acronym, today's alphabet land acronym a lot this week. So our term today is IEP. And for those of you who watch the show on a regular basis, you know this is something we talk about. It's IEP season right now. Many of you have been writing in. We had Dr. Grant Bechet answer a bunch of questions about IEPs yesterday and how involved parents need to be. So what is it we're talking about? Let's go back to basics so that we get a really clear idea of what this term means. So as far as our actual definition for IEP, IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. Some places around the country, they'll say Individualized Education Plan. Program, plan, either way, they're kind of interchangeable. And what we need to understand in the actual definition, it's a federally mandated legal document that details education goals for a specific child within the special education scope, okay? So it's a federal law that makes this thing a legal document that if a child has, and there's a whole classification, we talked about IDEA on Tuesday's show, and you can go to IDEA's website and see what the different classifications that qualify you for an IEP are, but autism is one of them. I think it's 10 different designations that can qualify you for an IEP, but autism qualifies you for an IEP. And I would imagine that now, one of the things that used to happen was that it was difficult if you had a PDD NOS. Sometimes that didn't necessarily, or if you had Asperger's, that didn't necessarily qualify you for an IEP. If you have been denied an IEP because you had an Asperger diagnosis, you certainly have a case now, because that now falls under the autism spectrum disorder designation in the DSM-5, so you should be entitled to an IEP now. But let's take a look at what our working definition is. So, okay, we know it's federally mandated, but what's the dealy-wheelie? What's the takeaway? What do I need to know as a parent? It's a written plan to educate a child with special needs that must be followed. Okay, now here's what's important about that, because, we all have that sense of nervousness of, oh my goodness, my child is going to go into a classroom and they're going to cross that threshold and I lose a certain amount of control. And I want to make sure that what we're doing at home, if we're working with a child and we're helping them, we're maintaining consequence strategies, we're making sure that certain things happen so that they're reinforced for some things, not reinforced for other things, because we're changing behavior and we're helping this child to learn how to learn and how exciting it is, right? And then you put them in a classroom and you want to know that those things are being upheld. Well, here's the great thing about an IEP is that whatever is on that IEP IEP, legally the school has to be doing. So if you've got a goal on the IEP that says your child will be saying the alphabet by May 31st of 2014, then they have to regularly have lesson plans and be teaching this to your child and show progress. And if they don't show progress, they have to change it so that they can get to May 31st. And either on May 31st, which is what their deadline on the IEP was, either your child needs to know the alphabet or they have to give a reason why and be changing things again. So that's a really important part of the IEP, that whatever goals are in there, that's what the school legally has to be doing. And if they aren't, it's called being non-compliant. And then, ladies and gentlemen, it gets a little on the ugly side, but you have legal recourse to force them to be able to teach what they put in the IEP. Now, the bad part of this is that sometimes schools, because they know that they're legally responsible for it, will put soft goals in that don't stretch our kids, that don't push them, because they have to uphold whatever they put in the document. So important that we make sure as parents that we advocate that we have good goals, appropriate goals in that IEP that are going to help our children get to where they need to get, right? And then again, we talk a lot about having a BIP, a behavior intervention plan. There's a place on the first page of your IEP that says behavior intervention plan attached, and if that is checked, then that means that the BIP is a part of that IEP, and legally the school has to uphold what the intervention is. So if you know that you have a child who bites, and you're working on a way to get the child to bite, right? Because you don't want them biting somebody else in the classroom. Of course you don't want them to do that. But it's important because in that BIP, the behavior intervention plan, you're going to have what the consequence for, you're going to have a strategy to make sure that they're not given opportunities to bite, but you're also going to have a consequence if the child does bite. Now, I'm going to guess that as a parent and as a teacher, it's not going to say this child gets locked into a room or gets put into a duffel bag, right? These would be inappropriate consequences, even if the child does the worst, which is doing the biting. And yet we see time and time again that parents from around the country are writing in, and we see these stories on the news that, you know, the substitute pinched the child's ears and left bruises, that a child got hit, that a child got put in a duffel bag. I'm not making that up. It's a true story that a teacher didn't like what the child was doing in the classroom, so she zipped him in to a duffel bag and left him there until his mother came to pick him up. You know, if there is a consequence for the behavior that your child is engaging in your BIP, it is now legally that school's responsibility to carry out that consequence. It's so important that what our IEP says is accurate for what the child needs, and that it's effective, and that it is science-based. So very important. So we have IEP meetings, we make that plan, and as parents, we have to be a part of that process to make that happen in a way that's proper. It could be life and death. What is in your IEP. Truly, it's one of the most important times of the year, and when you see parents start to stress about IEPs, that's why, because it lays the groundwork for the whole next year, and it has the potential to give tools to the people that are in your child's life to make them superheroes, supercharged to be able to get good things done, and it helps to protect your child from people who don't know what they're doing. And gives you legal recourse if they're doing things that they don't know what they're doing. So IEP, a really, really important thing. It helps to make things, to level that playing ground at school so that your child can excel, so that your child can grow, so that your child can potentially get caught up. Really, really important. Okay, so know what an IEP is, because you're going to want it in your back pocket. All right, we move on to our question of the day. We always like to ask you guys a question. And today, because we've been talking about this subject all week long, how do you practice acceptance in the autism community? This is a really important question for me this week because, as I said earlier, I'll be honest that I was a little bummed last week. This is supposed to be our autism awareness, autism acceptance, autism action month, whichever word you like to choose. This is when, as a community, we stand and we shine in the spotlight. I know for all of us, it's not about 1 month or 1 day. It's about 365 days in the year. But let's face it, we get more attention this month in the news and in the, in the press, in the media, in the world, with our families. People, the commercial businesses have joined us too, so we get more attention in this month. It is an opportunity for us as a community to shine, and we want acceptance more than anything else. I talk to lots of different people that come in here from lots of different groups. We try to give everybody a voice here, and when you get right down to it, the very basis of what everybody in the autism community wants is opportunities and acceptance. We want some compassion from the world at large, but we have to practice that. We have to start at home. And I really was dismayed, I don't know if the rest of you were too, by just a lot of segregation from the community last week. And if it starts at home, if acceptance starts at home, then we want to figure out how we practice this. And so my question to you is, how do you practice acceptance in the autism community? I'm learning about how I have to be more accepting. My education in that field is not done, so don't think that I'm calling myself a paragon of virtue here. I've got a lot to learn about words to choose that are welcoming to our adults who are on the spectrum, so that they don't feel like we're saying they are negative, that who they are is anything wrong or different. Really important that we listen to them tell us what hurts their feelings, because the last thing I want to do as a parent of a child in the autism community is use words that hurt somebody else's feelings. So let's talk about this today, about how do you practice acceptance in the autism community. I'm trying to weigh my words very carefully and mindfully with the idea of acceptance, and I've got a long way to go. I think we all do, but let's keep on moving on it. Now, in case you missed it, our topic for this entire week, if you couldn't have guessed already, is in fact autism acceptance. What is it? What does it look like? How are we getting there? Are we getting closer? Are we shooting ourselves in the foot? We're talking about that this week, because this is wherever you are in that big, beautiful circle of a community, we need to get there. And we need to get on the path, all of us, right? I think we can all agree on that. So, in any case, some of the different things that we have going on today on the show, really excited that we have real progress with Dr. Adel Najdowski. She's going to be with us. And I've specifically, and I actually remember the topic that I that I want to talk about today. I want to talk about memory and how we can all be working on memory skills and building memory skills. Today, we mentioned this yesterday, that our studio is in the headquarters for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. They're very generous with their space for us. And this entire week is Card Spirit Week, but most especially today, because today is Dr. Doreen Granpecha's birthday. We honor her today. So we'll take a couple of minutes to talk about that later on in the show. And then we have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox with us, and we call that Science Beat. He's got some things that he's going to talk to us about that will expand our minds. And we love that, right? So all of that and ever so much more. I'm just seeing that you guys have written in some questions as well. And so we will get to those. So stick with us more after these messages.
Hello, fellow activists. Last week, we talked about step number 1, accept and embrace this challenge. Now we're moving on to step number 2, educate yourself. After my son Wyatt was diagnosed, I put up a sign over my home office that said Autism Central. I went to school in my home office every night after my husband and Wyatt had gone to bed, because I was determined to learn everything there was about autism. That's because knowledge is power. Visit all the autism websites you can. Read all the books you can. Learn about all the organizations that are out there that offer free guides to help you. Some of them even offer mentors to help guide you. Find out about local support services. Find out about what educational services your child is entitled to. Get to every autism conference and seminar you can. I'll never forget the first autism conference that I went to. The first speaker was a beautiful, brilliant woman named Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet. She spoke about a therapy called Applied Behavioral Analysis, or ABA. She told about how it could improve the life of children with autism, and in some cases, recover them. Now, despite the fact that Wyatt had been diagnosed for over a year, nobody had told me about this therapy. I remember calling my husband on the cell phone and saying, "Honey, I met the woman who is going to help improve Wyatt's life." And I'm happy to say that 8 years later, that's true. Are you feeling a little overwhelmed by all the information that's out there? Well, you're not alone. But try different approaches for your child. Trust your gut. Just 40 short years ago, mothers were told if their child had autism that they would have to be institutionalized, and in some cases they were actually blamed for their child's autism for failing to bond with the child. That was called refrigerator mother syndrome. Well, thank goodness times have changed. So until next time, learn everything you can about autism and keep the faith.
Welcome back to Autism Live, and we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Adel Najdowski back to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We call this segment Real Progress with Dr. Adel because she comes in and helps us to get on track. We were just talking about being on track. I want to be on track in all the things that I do as a parent. And so she helps us to get on track because we can teach things. This is the empowerment moment of the show this morning. We can teach things. If things aren't going well, right? If it seems like you keep doing the same thing over again and you go, this isn't working well, we can then say, hey, there's something missing here. We want to work on something. And sometimes it's memory. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, like you say, oh, I forgot to do that again. We've been making fun of me because I have a box that has shoes sitting on a table that has gathered dust because they were supposed to go back and I keep forgetting to do it. So memory is a very complex thing, but it's a very, very important thing. And if you've been having difficulty with anything having to do with memory for yourself or your child, we don't just throw up our hands and go, well, that's it then. I'm not good at memory. We can actually get in there and work on it and make some real progress, which is why we call this Real Progress with Dr. Adel. See how I brought that full circle?
Oh, wow. You're amazing.
Not. But anyway, so talk to us about memory, because it's not just one kind of memory. We need to be thinking about this as many different kinds of memory to see where we need to shore up memory, correct?
Yeah, well, when it comes to remembering things, a lot of us don't remember things, and we have to do little things to help us to remember. So there's little strategies we can use that help to ensure that we remember things. Along with that, though, of course, you can just simply work on trying to strengthen recall skills.
Okay.
And this would start with, presenting something and then having almost no delay, and then asking the child to recall it, and then slowly inserting a longer and longer delay. Mm-hmm. And like you were saying, there's a lot of different things we want to make sure they can remember, just in case there's certain ones that are harder than others for the individual. So being able to remember something they saw, visual, something that they heard, being able to remember the spatial things. There's some people who are just really bad with remembering either where something is located or where they put it or how to get around geographically. Yeah. With directions and things like that. Yeah. Get lost in a building that they walked into, whatever. Yeah. Where they park their car.
Where they put their car keys. Right? We can all relate to at least one part of this where we go, oh yeah, I do that.
Yeah, and then there's also being able to now kind of remember, things when they're switched up a little. Mm-hmm. So you're given information, but now you have to not only remember it, but then rearrange it and then recall it in a different order or something like that.
Yeah. And that's going to be important to all of us in daily living skills. But when you think about it with small kids, I mean, I'm watching my son in 5th grade. It's all about the states and the capitals, right? And I'm seeing in all the testing and things that we can teach the capital and we can teach the state, and that's all very well and good. But then he needs to be able to do it in the reverse. So if I give him the capital, he can tell me which state.
Yeah.
And he needs to be able to remember the shape of the state and where in the country it goes, all these different things. And he needs to be able to do it no matter what order she asks.
Yeah.
That's really...
I mean, like, let's just pretend for a minute that you were going to go run errands and you need to go to 5 places.
Yeah.
You would use your working memory skills to not only remember the 5 places, but then to also arrange the order in which you're going to go to each place. And if you take that down to the level of a child, you could maybe have a child who's going to school.
Right.
And they have like a couple things they need to do, drop off something at the office, maybe get their lunch that they forgot in the lunchroom yesterday, and whatever, right? Like 2 or 3 things they're supposed to do. And if they just used regular old memory and just did them in the order they were told, they might be inefficiently walking around the school.
Right.
So they would instead figure out, okay, this one's first and that's the one I'm going to go to, but then they still can remember the other 2 they have to go to, and they rearrange the order and stuff. So that's where the working memory stuff comes in.
It's fascinating too, because it does have to be pliable to a certain extent, your memory. You can't, if all you have is rote memory of, A, B, C, you're not going to be as functional in getting things done.
Yeah, even think of how if you're doing a math problem in your head, you might actually visualize like the ones place and the tens place, and you might add up the ones in your head, and then now you move to the tens, but you still have to remember the ones.
Right.
While you're manipulating and doing something else over here. So,
unless you're now doing the core, have you seen all the things now about the core math and how they're teaching them in a different way? It frightens me.
Oh, is it interesting? I haven't checked that out yet.
Oh, we'll show you later.
Okay.
It's a little crazy. It's a lot of parents are screaming and going, "What is this math?" It's just.
I wonder if my
insane.
son's learning that way.
It's a little crazy.
Wow.
I'll show it to you during a break. I'm sure that you guys at home have seen a little bit of this on Facebook. Parents who are writing in saying, the child is saying, "I don't understand," and parents writing in saying, "None of us understand. It's not just you."
Right.
So, but in any case, talking about memory and how we use this, and I think a lot of times, if we're thinking about ourselves as adults, we have an area that's stronger than another area. And a lot of times people just accept and say, well, I'm not good at this kind of memory. I'm just not good spatially. I lose my keys every day.
Like, one thing I know I'm really bad at is when I meet a new person, I can never remember their name even 2 seconds after they told it to me. So I have a strategy that I have started using that helps me to remember names. And
because it's important to you.
Yeah.
That you learn their names. And I guess my point is that whenever we just accept and go, oh, well, that's what it is, we cut ourselves off from the opportunity to have a less, especially where memory is concerned, we can lower our stress if we're just willing to work on it. And imagine taking that to your kids. Don't just assume, oh, well, he or she does not have memory for this, they can't do it, we can't work on it. We can always work on things. And one of the great examples that I always think about is in the movie Recovered. There's the little girl Jana, and we have to get Jana on the show because she's an amazing adult. But you can watch the movie, and you can rent it or you can own it. Go to Amazon, and there's a moment where she's sitting there with Vince Redmond, who we have on the show as a regular now, but this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And they're sitting at a table, and he's telling her a story to sort of see where her memory is at. And he tells us a story about a bunny. And you just made the face that Janet makes.
Because I remember how she does.
It's painful to watch for any parent, because he sits there and he says, okay, so there was a bunny and his name was Peter and whatever.
Actually, his name was Scotty.
Scotty, that's what it was. You would remember that, and I don't remember that. His name was Scotty. And so he tells her like 3 facts, and then he says, okay, Jana, what's the name of the bunny? And this precious little girl, she's like 5, and she sits there and she makes this face, and she's trying so so hard. You can see her trying to find it in the mist in her brain that the bunny's name is Scotty. And then eventually he says, the bunny's name is Scotty. And she goes, oh, yeah, Scotty. And then he talks again and he says, what's the name of the bunny? And she doesn't know. It's, and it's one of those things your heart just squeezes, especially if you've ever had a child on the spectrum. That I always just say, Gem was like a whiteboard. You could write something on it and it was like, and it would be gone. And so, what's encouraging though about watching that in Recovered, you see that little girl who just cannot remember, and you see the anxiety that it gives her, and then you get to see her as a teenager and she's fine, and she can remember all kinds of things. And let me just tell you, she's an amazing young woman who's moving and shaking and doing all kinds of things in her life. Yeah. We can teach our kids even when it's difficult.
And the thing is sometimes when kids have that difficulty with memory, they actually get considered to be non-compliant, especially in the school setting, because the teacher gives instructions and then the children are supposed to start following those instructions and working. So they might explain a worksheet and what you're supposed to do, and then now, okay, everybody do the worksheet. And then you see sometimes kids that don't do it and they're not doing anything, and then instead it gets mistaken as like challenging behavior of, she's just non-compliant, she doesn't, follow instructions and do what I've told her, when in reality it's literally a memory issue in that sense.
And the consequences for that are so far-reaching, because all it takes is like one teacher in first grade who says, okay, this child is non-compliant. So they get put in the group of kids who are non-compliant, and it wasn't that to begin with. So now they're in the group of kids that are non-compliant, so that group's going to move slower, right? And they're going to, learn all kinds of other behaviors. It's going to follow them throughout. They might get put in, instead of being included in a classroom, get in a special day classroom that's going to move. We're not moving towards getting the child caught up, we're moving backwards, and all because the memory wasn't there.
Yeah, so what we need to do is give them strategies to be able to remember information, and there's a lot of different things out there.
Okay, so what we should do is take a break, and then when we come back, Dr. Najdowski is going to give us some idea of some strategies that we can do to help build memory for our kids and for ourselves, really. Stick with us.
Hi, this is Lisa Ackerman, back again, Talk of Facts. Wanted to share with one of the most popular questions that we get, and that is, do children with autism recover? I don't know how to say it loud enough. Yes! Scream it from the mountaintops. We've seen it and witnessed it for over a decade at TACA. Thousands of children that lose their diagnosis. They become indistinguishable from their peers following therapeutics and medical intervention. And in 2013, the NIH, the National Institute of Health, agreed. They studied children that had an autism diagnosis and did an in-depth analysis, and so showed that children with autism actually can recover. And what I'm so excited about is the odds are in your favor. The study concluded that 10 to 20% of children with autism will recover after intensive early intervention and therapeutics and medical intervention. You may be thinking, wait, 10, 20%? That doesn't seem like a big number. Let me tell you why it is. For decades, we've been told autism is a no hope, nothing you can do. And what we know today is, yes, there is hope. So now that people know that recovery is possible, it's actually an option that can happen for families that, put what they can into the journey, and God willing, get their kid through the other side so they can live their lives in a beautiful way. I'm excited to share with you that recovery is possible. So now we can all shoot for that together.
Welcome back to Autism Live, and to this segment, which we call Real Progress with Dr. Adel. Dr. Adel Najdowski is here with us. She's one of the co-creators of Skills, a really remarkable online tool that gives us a great curriculum for kids on the spectrum, and helps us to be able to access lots of different things that we can be doing with our kids. That's not a great explanation of all the things you can do with Skills, but I want to get into talking about memory. So Dr. Najdowski is here with us. We said before the break that we were going to talk about different ways we can help our children to learn and grow their memory. Help us out, Dr. Najdowski. What can we be doing?
So very funny is on this topic. During the break, I decided to write myself a list so that I could remember more of the different things once you put me on the spot.
There you go. There you go.
Writing a list or reminder for yourself is one thing you can do.
Absolutely.
And like in my phone, I have this really cool app. It's called Clear. And basically you can just create lists. And so then you don't have to think or worry anymore about it. So whatever the topic is, groceries, to do, whatever. I have different topics and you just pop it open. I even have an evening routine list because sometimes I forget to do certain things. Or I'll put like a Post-it note out that has something if I'm supposed to remember it in the morning. Like, you know, if something different in my schedule is going to happen, I might need to put that out or else I'm going to forget.
I have to say, too, that sometimes just the act of doing the list, like I lose lists all the time. I forget where I put the list, but sometimes just writing it out on the list because it's a visual and I'm having to physically do something, sometimes that strengthens the memory in and of itself.
Okay, so that's a good point. So what you just kind of talked about is like rehearsal. When you're writing it, you're rehearsing it, basically. And so you can do that both at the level of just kind of rehearsing to yourself, like saying it over and over. It could be out loud, it could be in your head. So like a kid who can't seem to follow the directions of the teacher, you could teach them to rehearse the directions in their head multiple times while they're getting the book out and preparing until they basically got it to where they got it. Or you could teach them to maybe write something down to themselves to remember. So rehearsing something visual. Remember I said that I always forget people's names when I first meet them?
Yes.
So my strategy that works for me now is that if it's an everyday name, then I'll just visualize how to spell it.
Okay.
And that actually helps me remember it. If it's a new name, then I ask them, how do you spell that? And I actually need to kind of know that too in order to pronounce it correctly, because a lot of times the names I hear, I'm like, I'm going to say it wrong because I can't exactly hear every sound they're saying. So I'll ask them, how do you spell that? And then they'll tell me, and then I'll just rehearse that 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
And then I've got it.
Amazing.
So visualizing things like that. That's basically what I'm doing in that instance, is visualizing something that's helping me to remember.
I know people who picture not the letters for a name, but something that will help them to remember.
Yeah.
So I'm never good at that. I met a doctor and I said afterwards, I said, I know his name has something to do with water. Because his last name was Brooke. And I was like, I'm picturing water, but I don't know what it is. It's not helping me, right? So it's got to be specific to you. It has to actually help. You know. Okay, so what else can we do to help?
You could come up with, like kids for studying, use flashcards and have them actually go through them multiple times. And one strategy I used to use when I was studying even for graduate school is I would write out all my flashcards and then I would go through a couple until I felt really good, and then I'd add a couple more to the mix, and then a couple more to the mix.
Yeah. If
I had too big of a stack to begin with, I wasn't getting enough repetition and practice opportunity for all the ones in the pile.
Interesting.
And then, of course, even just practice is another thing too. Like if they're learning to spell something, have them write it over and over again. And just getting more experience with whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So, that opportunity. We always talk about the more opportunities that you have, so the more times that you have to go through it, the more likely it's going to stick.
Yeah. You can also do things like set, alarms on your phone to go off at a certain time to remind you to do something or to vibrate. You could text yourself, email yourself, phone yourself, do little things like that so you remember. Mnemonic devices, that one that you always talk about.
I was saying Roy G. Biv during the commercial because I could never remember the colors of the rainbow, but I was taught Roy G. Biv. Now, why I can remember what Roy G. Biv, but I can't remember the colors in order, but it works for me. And sometimes my husband and I were just doing the thing the other day, there's just weird mnemonic devices, like we were trying to remember how many days there were in the month of March. And there's the device of using your knuckles. That your knuckles, you start with January, and so that's a month with 31, and the space between becomes the next month. So it's January, February, March. So I know, and so I took out my hand. He said, "How many days are there in March?" And I said, "Oh, it's 31." And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "You don't know the knuckle thing? That, there are all kinds of weird ways."
So what exactly is it? This is 31 and then...
Knuckles are 31 and anything between the knuckle is not 31. And so we know that February is, 28 or 29 and all the other ones are 30. So it goes January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, and because you start on a knuckle again, because there are months that have 31 back to back, so the knuckles work out for the 12 months.
Oh, wow.
And it helps you to remember. So, there are a whole bunch of people from a certain era that if you ask them how many days there are in a month, we'll pull out our knuckles and people will go, what on earth are you doing?
Yeah,
But it's
and
just a device.
That's the thing. You can make little sayings out of things. Like I've taught like loosey-goosey, righty-tighty to remember turning right or left for strengthening or loosening something.
And those just help us to remember things that we have to remember.
You can make things into a song. You could do. There's a lot of different things like that you can do.
My son, I was saying he's struggling, not struggling, but we've been working on the state capitals, and my little grandniece knew all her state capitals when she was 3 because it was a song and she could just do all of it. When she gets to 5th grade, she's just going to sit there and sing and know it all and get 100.
But a lot of it is just also teaching kids to attend to stuff, because if they're not attending to it, there's no way they're going to remember it. So some kids, for example, have a hard time with recalling things from earlier in the day. They come home and you ask, what'd you do at school? And they don't even remember to tell you. Yeah. So that's a whole nother issue, as well as learning like actual events or like exchanges with people and actions and things that you've done.
And one of the things I think we've talked about before on the show for that one is starting small and giving them a reward for remembering one thing.
Yeah.
It seems like once we talked about this before, and that both a viewer and myself, we were trying to get our sons to remember and tell us. So we had a whole device where the aide wrote something down, and he had to remember it, and he got a reward if he got it. And
yeah, I mean, it can help to
really
go
useful.
into the environment in which he's present, and will have to eventually remember and talk about what's going on, and remember, or later you're going to be asking you to remember these things and actually get them to think about it, because that's where you're getting them to attend to the information. Yeah. That's where the rehearsal helps and stuff, because you're attending to it. Someone says it and then you rehearse it. But also when you're even just trying to work on like simple recall, you can just present things like a sound or a picture card or something, and then take it away and then ask them a question about it. And see if they can remember what they saw, and then even getting into like 2 things at once, and can they remember both and stuff like that, and increasing the delay, of course, because at first it's almost nothing, and then you just get to a longer and longer delay.
It can be so scary when somebody doesn't remember something. You know what I mean? For any of us who have had a loved one who's had Alzheimer's, I think there's an emotional response when somebody doesn't remember something, and especially for our young kids, if they're not remembering something, I think as a parent it can bring up that, but I love all of this, Dr. Najdowski, because it empowers us to know that this is teachable. It helped me to think of memory as a muscle. And for our kids that are having trouble, then we just think, okay, it's a flabby muscle. I got to start really small and build up from there. But we can build memory skills in kids so that they can remember things. Yeah. And what I think a lot of times what we find is with our kids is that once they learn these things, they have a better memory than the rest of us, because they'll use the tools. My son now will say to me all the time, my son who was the whiteboard that we just kept, every day starting someplace new, now he says, Mom, I can't believe you don't remember. You said this and we were there and this happened. And I go, oh my gosh. It can be a little frightening. But when we give them the tools, then they have the ability to do things. Yeah. And memory is so useful for so many different things. It's going to be useful in social situations, right? It's going to be one of the strongest skills in academics that they're going to rely on is memory. Yeah. You have to have good memory for academic. And we know that, having strong academic and strong social sets you up to be a better employee. Yeah. It's not that they're not the only things, but if we're working to have our kids be employable, this is a great skill to focus some time on. Yeah. So take a minute for us, Dr. Najdowski. You've talked about some of these different things that are there. And as I said, as we started talking, you're one of the co-creators of skills. If I'm a parent and I go, okay, this is all well and good, but I'd love to have a set of lessons that I could follow about memory, it's all there in skills, correct?
Yeah, it's part of the skills curriculum. It's in the EF curriculum. EF means executive functions. Mm-hmm. There's a whole domain called memory, and there's individual lessons to kind of like to focus in on the different kinds of information people would learn to remember. So there's visual, auditory, spatial, episodic, which is just remembering like things from experiences, and probably more that I'm not remembering. No, I know there's working memory.
There's meta memory. Did you say meta memory? Meta memory is the one that I can remember.
The meta memory is really amazing because that one basically teaches kids strategies for remembering things. So it actually presents information and then it has them problem solve and figure out what is the best way that you could remember this. And you give them a bunch of options. We use like visual banks and things where we have little icons to represent the different strategies. They learn all the strategies. Yeah. And then we say, here's the information you need to remember. Pick something from this bank that you think will help you remember it. They pick something, then they actually practice, and then we see if they can remember it or not. So we're giving them the tools to be better at like managing themselves, remembering things.
Yeah, it's that old adage where we say if you can give a man a fish and he eats for the day, but you teach a man how to fish and he can feed himself for his whole life. And that meta memory really is about giving your child or yourself the tools to be able to take any situation and figure out how am I going to remember what I need to do, because the equation isn't always the same. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Really super duper. And again, all of those lessons are available in skills. We've been talking a lot about IEPs this week. Okay. Because it's IEP season, and I want to encourage people that you can still get a 14-day free trial of skills. Right. Go in there, take the assessment, and see where your child's memory skills are so you can see where you would need to start teaching.
Yeah, and when you do the assessment, you're able to actually go straight into the executive functions area and straight into the memory ones. You don't have to spend time on the entire assessment if you just want to know about this particular area.
Absolutely. And then you can have a nice snapshot of, well, I think what's so useful is knowing where your child's strengths are and where you need to shore up. I mean, you may not even know that for yourself, but it would be great to have a picture of, well, I know that my child's episodic memory is great, but the spatial memory isn't so hot. Like, just to be able to look at that and know that's powerful information. And you can do that very quickly on skills and be able to look and say, okay, well, this is where we're at with this. Right. It's such a wonderful, you're too young for us to talk about that being your only legacy, but it's a wonderful legacy that those things are there that you've left for us, for all of us to be able to do all that. So it's pretty remarkable, especially in one so young, Padawan. Right? It's a wonderful thing. I can't wait to
I'm not feeling so young lately.
Well, you are. And so wonderful. I'm really hopeful to see what you come up with next. But anyway, can you stick with us for one more little segment?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with Dr. Adel Najdowski. Stick with us.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. We're going to be working on identifying and labeling emotions. In February of last year, I know we did something super similar, but I promise you for this project it's going to be faster and easier because part of the project you'll be printing from our Facebook page at facebook.com/autism-live. Well, here's the rest of the materials you'll be needing. Templates, scissors, crayons, and tape. The first step you're going to do is print the template from facebook.com/autism-live. I have them right here, and I printed them double-sided. So now that I have all the pages printed out, I'm going to hand it off to my kiddo to have them color it in. So while they're coloring the face, you can of course work on identifying colors, labeling features, staying in the lines, and of course working on that pincer grasp. Once your child has finished coloring all the faces, you're going to take the pieces of paper and fold them in half. Once I have all the pages folded in half, I'm going to layer them together like a booklet. Now that I have them like this, I'm going to do is take my tape inside and kind of tape it together so they're bound together. If you have a stapler, you can do that too. Alright, now that this has been taped together, it looks like I have a book. So we're almost done with the project. All we need to do now is cut along the dotted line. Keep in mind, don't go all the way across to the edge or else it's going to be cut into thirds and it's not going to be a solid book anymore. The other thing in mind is, your kid can work on following a straight line while cutting, and if they can't do that, help them out. Alright, my booklet now has been cut up, and as you can see, I can now take a tab and flip it, and it'll change the look of the face. And what you can do is, ask your child how the emotion of the face changes based on what parts of the features you change. Well, I hope you had fun doing this activity with me, and until next time, craft on, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live and to this segment which we call Real Progress with Dr. Adel Najdowski. From time to time, we ask our experts to give a 2-minute answer to questions that we know are some of the top questions for individuals who are part of the autism community. So, today, Dr. Adel Najdowski is going to answer the question, is it difficult to teach a child on the autism spectrum toilet training?
I would say that it can be difficult with some kids a little more than others, but we definitely have the strategies to do it. It takes a lot of motivation and perseverance and dedication for the initial part of it. You have to be very on top of it, very consistent. There's a very good book out there. It's by Azrin and Fox, and it's called How to Toilet Train Your Child in One Day. And it basically starts out with literally spending the first day in the bathroom. So you're not leaving the bathroom. And putting your child on the toilet on a schedule. And basically doing that very often. And so what we can do is collect data on things like how often they're going, make sure that the schedule is often enough. But you also feed them full of liquids, and you give them salty foods. The more salty foods they have, the more they want to drink. There's more then opportunity for practice of going. As soon as you see them, if they start to go at all when they're not sitting, you set them down on the toilet. And then, of course, it's huge reinforcement for when they do go in the toilet correctly. If you just stick with it and you stick to the schedule, like as they're successful, you can start to move away from the bathroom. And you're going to see great results. Now, the way I'm talking about it right now is the 2-minute version, so it makes it sound extremely easy. It still is difficult and it's a lot of work, but it's something that is absolutely possible with individuals on the spectrum.
And I asked Dr. Najdowski to talk about this because I find whenever I'm sitting with a BCBA and the subject of toilet training comes up, there is, it's inexplicable, but there is a confidence, there is an awareness of, I see it all over you guys that, oh, this is something we can do. This is something we do on a regular basis. It's very run-of-the-mill. It's so possible. Yeah. That's what you guys exude is that, oh, toilet training, well, we absolutely know we're going to be successful.
Yeah.
There's a confidence. And I always marvel at it because I know I can remember very well that when we started ABA, it was one of my biggest concerns. I wasn't even at the point where I was hoping that my child was going to be able to attend school yet because I didn't know that the toilet training was going to happen. And there are many families that are out there that have kids that are older, that are, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, that their lives are still revolving around pull-ups. Their lives are still revolving around diapers.
Well, and there's research actually to show that if you try to potty train a child while you are letting them wear diapers, it's going to happen a lot slower.
Yeah.
So you got to get them into the underwear and let them feel that sensation of being wet and having accidents. Let them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So that it's something that they want to escape and that they don't want.
But what I hear from parents is, for parents who haven't delved into it yet, there's a fear of, is my child going to be able to do this? It's a real milestone in a family, that moment in which you can move freely about the world and know that your child isn't going to require 3 sets of clothes, and that, you're going to have some sense of it. And it's one of those things that when you have it, you kind of take it for granted, but up until the moment that you have it, your whole world revolves around that. And I just get so hopeful for parents when I talk to you guys and I see that level of confidence. And I want to share with parents that they can do this, that the experts know how to get this done. And it may be that you've tried before, because I've never yet met a parent of a 15-year-old who wasn't toilet trained who hadn't tried, right?
Right.
But there is a method that's tried and true, and it may take your child a little while. But if you've given up on it, I want to encourage you, don't give up. Mm-hmm. Seek the help of a BCBA who has extensive experience with this. They can get this done.
Yeah, I know a lot of families get concerned with, when we're doing the schedule training, the kids will go based on the schedule, but then there gets to be a point where they're like, when are they just going to start going by themselves? And that happens naturally for some kids, and for others it just never does. And so there is that transition period, and there's things you can do to get them to start to actually initiate to go on their own, like using, watches that vibrate on the schedule. So that way, I mean, they're still reliant on something, but at least you're not having to tell them.
The pants are dry.
Yeah. Or starting to fade out your prompt of telling them to go potty on the schedule, but rather like, maybe if you have icons around or something, like gesturing toward it and then fading that to just an expectant look.
Right.
Maybe putting the icons all over the place so that they're always around, and then, eventually fading all of those kind of things.
But this is on this playing field, we don't give up.
Yeah.
We don't give up. This is something that's absolutely doable and possible. So if you're hearing this and you're one of those parents, and I know parents have said to me, I'm ashamed to admit it because I feel like a failure because so many other people have had success with it. But don't give up. Don't be ashamed. Don't give up. Seek help of an expert, because this is totally doable.
Yeah. And one last thing I want to mention too is that there's another very great tool out there. It's called the urine alarm.
Okay.
And it's something that attaches to their underwear, and it can sense like that the child has to go. It's something to do with like the condensation or something of the liquid or whatever, and it will actually beep. And that might be good for some. I haven't actually seen any research on this, but I've been thinking a lot about this because some families say, like, we did all that stuff that you're talking about and it didn't work for us or whatever. First of all, if you did it doesn't mean it was necessarily done properly, because when people fade the schedule too quickly, then there's accidents again. So you have to make sure you're being very consistent and staying with the stay in the bathroom method and then slowly increasing the schedule. But I wouldn't be surprised if there really is a small percentage of people out there who have done all that and still they're having problems because maybe the child can't actually feel the sensation of having to go. Mm-hmm. I believe that probably does exist, like some sort of neurological thing or sensory thing or something. Mm-hmm. This alarm would alert them that they needed to go. And so it's mainly used at night as like a bedwetting thing because kids usually are sleeping through and they're not aware or whatever. So that's something you can do for nighttime. But it might be something that is doable for an older person on the spectrum in order to help train them to actually identify what it does feel like to go. Because imagine if that thing beeps every time you have to go. Yeah. You might go, after a while of enough pairings, oh, that's what it feels like. And when that happens, I'm supposed to go to the bathroom. Absolutely. And it might be able to be faded out. I don't know that for sure. I haven't actually tried that method, but it does work at night. For sure, the urine alarm has been shown to be effective for night bedwetting.
All right, really important information. Thank you so much for being here and for all the work that you do for our community.
Thank you for
appreciate
having me.
you. We are going to take a break and go to the A Word now. This is the ongoing documentary being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders following a little boy, Jack Riley, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. And at this point in the series, this is one of my favorite episodes of the A Word that we're showing this week. It's one of the hardest, I'll be honest with you, because we see a tantrum and we see how the therapist deals with it, and then we see why the tantrum happened. Remember how we always talk about how there's a function for every behavior, and sometimes, and it appears like this tantrum comes out of nowhere, but eventually we realize why the tantrum happened, and it becomes all the more important to give this little boy functional communication as quickly as possible, which then you can watch a later episode and see how well he has come, how far this little boy has come. But take a look. There's so much to be learned. And then when we come back, we're going to have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox for our Science Beat segment. So stick with us.
Very, very glamorous way of eating. Good boy. Thank you for taking a bite.
It's been about 1 week since Jack Riley's therapist began the feeding program with him. Feeding has been a major behavioral issue for Jack Riley. He refuses to feed himself and typically swats away food when his parents or others attempt to feed him. Up until a week ago, Cheryl and Mike would play a movie or give him toys to distract him in order to get a bite in. During clinic, Jack Riley's supervisor, Sabrina, suggested pausing the movie to motivate him to feed himself so he is able to get his reward.
Okay, let's take a bite. Okay. Oops, I didn't do it. I just touched it. Take a bite. Good.
Very good.
Good bite. One more bite. Oh, that's a good one.
Nice.
Yay. Can you take a third one for Mama? Oh. I know. Especially with yogurt. Hi.
Hi, buddy.
There you go. You did great. Oh yeah, he never fed himself yogurt. When we do it at night, I'll do applesauce with the video and then bring this out for the other stuff just to break it up.
Kit.
Take a bite. Kit. Good talking. Kit. Good.
Good eating too, buddy.
It's a little bitty bite, but it counts. Yay!
How do you feel about that it's so dependent on the iPhone?
He'll take 3 bites in between games, so I think eventually it'll be 4 bites, and eventually it'll be finish the soup, and you can have the iPhone. So I think we can work it. That's been less than a week of just limiting that even, so he'll do it. I think if he's got a big enough reward at the end, he'll do it. Take a bite. Pea soup. Huge bite. Holy schmoly. Good job, kiddo. Yay! That was really good. You want to take another bite? Oh, it's cat. It's totally worth another bite. It's totally worth. Let's take 3 bites. You can do it. That'll count. I'll give you credit since it's pea soup. Mommy wouldn't eat that.
So this self-feeding just happened in this past week?
Since Sabrina suggested to pause the video, which I thought would never work. I thought it would just make him mad. And he has gotten mad. We've had some tantrums, to say the least, but he's kind of starting to figure out that we're not kidding.
Daddy.
Daddy?
Papa.
Daddy and Mommy.
Mommy.
And Papa. Do you see Papa?
Papa.
What? Baby.
Papi.
Baby.
Papi.
Mommy or baby? I don't know.
Papi.
Mommy, baby. Mommy,
Papa.
baby, baby.
Papa. Baby.
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 Is he a baby too?
I'm not a baby.
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 Hold on. Look, Jack Riley, look. What is this? Baby.
Jessica continues teaching functional pretend play to Jack Riley. The reason is so he's able to play appropriately with his toys and be able to interact with other kids when preschool begins.
Knock, knock. Let's go. Let's go. You do it. Let's go.
And we're also doing a token system now where he has to sit and earn 3 tokens before he's able to get up, just so that he sits longer, and he also has a visual so that he knows that, okay, when I get all my stickers, then I can go play and do whatever it is that I want to do. Play! So now we're having him do 3 things for us first, and then letting him go. What is it? It's an iguana. Yeah. Iguana. Good try. That's iguana. Very good. It looks like a guitar. It's a violin. Is it violin?
Baby.
Yeah, violin. I love how you're saying all your words, especially all the new words. So what's that one? Umbrella. You say it? Umbrella. Good. We're having him identify labels, but also using a full sentence response. So instead of just saying chicken, we're having him say it's a chicken, just so we can develop his language a little better. And he just gets used to labeling things that way. All right.
Bubble.
Yeah, bubbles. You want more?
The bubble.
Okay, sit down. We gotta get our stickers. Yeah. Okay. All the way. Sit down all the way. Thank you. What is it? Say it's. No, look better. Jack Riley, do you want bubbles? Do you want bubbles? Do you want bubbles?
Bubble.
Yeah, okay. What is it? Say it's. Yeah, it's a chicken. Good job. 2 more stickers. Look. Okay, what is it? Say it's. Yeah, it's a chicken. 1 more. What is it? Good job. There you go, Jack. You get your bubbles. Good job. Look. All your stickers. It took us a few days to even get him to say it's so he was just saying chicken because he knows what it is. But yeah, today it's he's saying a chicken, and then at the end he said it's a chicken. So that's actually pretty good. No, sit down, and then you get bubbles. No. Jack Riley. Okay. Come on. Sit down. And then I give you bubbles. Yeah. There you go. That's sit down. Here we go. All right, can you try? Okay, ready? Sit down. No, you need to sit down. No, try again. Sit down.
Sit down, buddy.
Ow. No, try again, honey. Sit down, buddy. Okay, you try, okay? Yay! You try. Ready? Sit down. Okay. This is sit down, bud. Okay? Okay, you try. Jack Riley, try.
As you saw earlier, sit down is a task Jack Riley knows how to do. Right now, Jessica is establishing compliance and consistency in following requests.
Okay. Hey, bud. Hey. You try again. Okay. No. Try again, buddy. Better chair. All right. Let's use that one, okay? Okay. Ready? Ready? Sit down. That's it. Bubbles. Jack, first, and then you get bubbles. Okay. Show me how you sit. Do you want bubbles? Sit down. That's down. Now, Jack Riley, try all by yourself. Okay?
Show me. I'm ready. Show me how you sit.
Sit down.
Sit down.
Sit down.
Sit down.
Sit down. Okay, all by yourself.
Show me how you sit.
Ready? Sit down. There you go. That's sitting. There you go, bud. Bubbles.
Can you show me?
You want these? Or you want those?
You want to show me how you sit? I know it was hard, wasn't it? Oh.
See, now I think it's just more attention. It's all attention. He's just waiting for Mike to go over there. Or he's pooping.
That would be a better reason.
He's going right. Of course, I didn't sweep under there today, so it's like he's gonna be wearing it.
Do you think he might be pooping?
Well, there would be a reason why he'd want to go into a private spot and get a minute, and if we weren't giving him that minute to do it, that could be why he went a little nutty there.
He's definitely due.
That could be. I mean, that definitely makes him mad, and I've caught him a few times where I try to get him like up on the chair at bedtime, and something tells me that now's not the time to fight him, and I'll let him down, and he'll go in the corner and do his business.
The reason Jack Riley's behavior was so intense was because he couldn't communicate his needs. This is why language is so important. Without it, how can he let others know his wants and desires?
We need to teach him that. I have to go to the bathroom, guys. Give me a minute. That's all you have to say. It's like bubbles are nice, but I got stuff to do. Feel better, buddy?
Welcome back to Autism Live. I just want to remind you that that was the A word that you were watching, and you can see what happens later on in this progression when Jack Riley gets that functional communication so he can tell people when he has to go to the bathroom by watching the series. For those of you who had more questions about toilet training, there's like 3 different episodes where they show the toilet training with Jack Riley and how successful they were with that. I encourage you to watch that entire series, and again, it's on its very own YouTube page. But right now, here in the studio, we have with us Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. He's the head of research and development at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders and the director of the Autism Research Group. We welcome him here every Friday that we can. Fridays. I'm so excited. It used to be Friday. But now we welcome him every Thursday that we can get him here. He has, as I always say, a beautiful mind, and we love to pick it for research and information. It's a great thing to do. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. And this week I asked you to come in and specifically talk about the science behind recovery.
Great.
We still have parents who are out there who get offended when we talk about recovery, and think that that's some pie in the sky thing that isn't real, that it's just people saying that they're doing things and it's not happening. And I always like to talk about it in real terms. So tell us, maybe if you define for us what recovery is, what it looks like, and then let's talk about the science that supports this is a very real thing. This is not a unicorn. It's very real, and it's been going on for a while.
That's right. So recovery means different things to different people. There's a lot of quacks out there on the internet saying that any old treatment that they've thought of can cure autism or can recover kids. You know, you've heard of things as crazy as, getting in a sauna is going to cure your child of autism, or, special diets, things like that. And most of that stuff is really kind of completely lacks scientific support. But what we mean by recovery at CARD, and what ABA folks have been doing for decades in terms of recovering children is essentially what it amounts to is removing the child's functional impairment to the point where they're able to succeed in their everyday life, to the extent where they don't need supports anymore. Okay, so it's useful to go all the way back to the DSM definition of what a disorder is. And by definition, a disorder is a situation where the symptoms create impairment to the point where it negatively impacts your daily quality of life. Okay, it's not just a behavior that you do, it's that behavior or lack of skills creates significant functional impairment in your ability to live your everyday life. So for example, if you go home and have a beer every night, that's not alcoholism, unless every time you have a beer you beat your wife. Then it is. Does that make sense? Okay.
Absolutely.
So same thing with being really obsessive about something. Let's say you really love collecting toy trains, okay? That's not a disorder, that's not a problem, unless you spend so much time and money collecting trains that your house is completely full of trains, you lose your job, you lose your marriage, right? Then that actually becomes a disorder, because those behaviors or those lack of skills create significant functional impairment in your day-to-day life. So our definition of recovery at CARD is the absence of that. Okay, so when you take a child, if they have a legitimate diagnosis of autism, it means that their social communication and their repetitive behaviors are sufficiently problematic to create a significant problem in their day-to-day life. And through teaching skills in language, social skills, play, academics, independent living skills, everything we teach in a good quality ABA program, and through teaching the child to decrease their challenging behaviors and stereotypy and replace them with more functional alternative behaviors, if all of that results in the child not needing help anymore because they're able to function just like their same age peers, then they no longer qualify for the diagnosis.
Right.
Okay. And so the way that we measure it is we send the kid to an expert diagnostician, either a medical doctor or a licensed psychologist who's an expert in diagnosing. That person does an evaluation of the child, and if they honestly don't meet the criteria anymore for any ASD diagnosis, then that's the first piece. Okay. The second piece is standardized testing in areas of language, intelligence, social skills, and independent living skills. And if the child scores within the average range on all of those tests, then great, that's the next piece. Then the final piece for us, in terms of how we measure it, is you place the child in just a normal mainstream environment and they're able to be successful. So you put them in mainstream school or mainstream preschool without any special supports, no one-to-one, no paraprofessionals, no IEP. You just throw them in, okay, and the child continues to do well and succeeds and gets passing grades, makes friends, has fun. Doesn't mean they're perfect, doesn't mean they're normal, right? What's normal anyways?
Right.
But just like the rest of us, you're in a mainstream environment and able to be successful.
And I think it's so great to hear you say all these things, because a lot of times people think, oh, well, if they've recovered from autism, then they have no quirks. They have no, right? We all have quirks. Every single one of us has quirks. We still have our personality. So we're not talking about wiping a slate clean. We're talking about there's no disabling aspects. Disabling, the true sense of the word. They are able to do the things that they want to do.
Right, exactly. And so, you know, a lot lot of people, and I'm not going to say that these people are wrong, I'm just going to say I have a different perspective, but some people in the autism community sort of think that autism is equivalent to a personality type or a different perspective on the world or a different way of looking at the world. And I'm going to say I don't agree with that.
Okay.
And that isn't actually how disorders are defined, period. Having a unique perspective is not a disorder.
Right.
If anything, that's a superpower. That's great. What's wrong with having a unique perspective, right? Being really good at math and statistics, that's not a disorder, right? That's a superpower, right? Maybe even like being really honest, that's not a disorder, right? It's great. It only becomes problematic if you also don't have the ability to be tactful and be socially appropriate, even though you'd rather be honest, right? So all of us would rather tell someone exactly what we feel and exactly what we think, but we realize and we learn that, okay, it's going to be more successful socially and vocationally and academically if we, sugarcoat it a little bit or be a little bit less overly blunt, right? So a lot of the things that people say are sort of characteristic of autism or ASD are not autism. Autism, by definition, is, like you're saying, is symptoms that are severe enough to prevent the individual from succeeding in their daily life. So if you're, and so the goal of ABA is to just decrease that severity to where the individual can successfully participate in daily life.
And I'm a parent, and I'm a visual parent, and what I always think of is that I want to move the obstacles out of my son's way.
Exactly.
The obstacles that don't need to be there. That's all, that I'm trying to do. And when we get to the point where the child or the adult or the teenager no longer qualifies for that disorder diagnosis, and they did it one time, then the word that you use is recovered.
That's just the label for that outcome that we use, you know. And it's, and again, we're not trying to make anybody normal, right? I mean, if you go take a random sample of 100 typically developing people, we're all different. We're all interesting, quirky. Some people hate social interaction, right? But that's not a disorder. You don't have to like social interaction to be normal, right? You just have to be able to interact socially if you want to. And that's what we teach, right?
And that is
so we're giving the kids tools so they can make their own choices. If they want to grow up and have no friends, that's up to them, but we're going to give them the tools to be able to make friends if they want them, right?
Yes.
And choosing to not have friends is not a disorder. It's only a disorder if you don't have the ability to make friends if you want to.
My mother always said, I'm going to teach you how to clean a house so that you know how to do it. Then if you choose not to, it's your business.
That's right.
Same kind of thing.
It's exactly
But at
the
least
same
you
thing.
know how to do it and you can make an informed choice.
That's right.
And I choose not to clean my house on a regular basis. It's just one of those things. But in any case, okay, so now you know what recovered is. Now you know what people are talking about when they talk about recovered. Now we're going to take a short break and we're going to come back and talk about the research that shows that that's absolutely possible, that you can move those obstacles out of the way so that an individual is able to do the things that they want to do, and how that happens, but the science that shows that it's absolutely not a unicorn. It happens every day. So with more people than you can imagine. So stick with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hi, welcome to Camp Discovery, a free-to-play suite of fun, interactive learning games for kids 2 and up, designed by experts in autism. Camp Discovery will open your early learner to a world of new skills, shapes, numbers, colors, locations, emotions, and more. Let's get started.
Please choose a level.
Objects. First, Camp Discovery's Intelligent Preference Assessment determines your child's preferred reward for choosing correctly. Okay, got it. Let's play. Camp Discovery creates a motivating learning environment for your child by minimizing incorrect responses and maximizing successful ones.
Find the shoes.
Respond correctly and your child is rewarded with their favorite animations.
You did it.
Respond incorrectly and our unique prompting system guides your child to the correct answer by making it the largest choice.
That's not it. Try again. Way to go.
Continue to answer correctly and the size gradually reduces until the child makes the correct choice independently.
You win.
Success! Rewards motivate learning. Complete a round and your child is rewarded with a fun mini-game. Track your child's progress with easy-to-read graphs. Multiple settings options allow you to customize Camp Discovery to your child's unique needs. All this in one single app, the Camp Discovery app, available for free on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon Store.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Our very special guest right now is Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. He is the director of the Autism Research Group, and we've asked him to talk with us a little bit about the science behind the term recovered, what we just defined recovery from autism. So a lot of people think, oh, that doesn't happen, that never happens. These kids didn't have autism before, they were misdiagnosed, because there is no recovery from autism.
Right.
But there are so many studies now. What do they tell us?
Okay. So, and just kind of back to our definition, if you think autism is just being sort of a different, quirky perspective on life, then yeah, there's no recovery from that. Why would we want to recover someone from being different and being interesting? That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about recovering someone from not being able to communicate when they want to, recovering someone from not being able to make friends if they want to, recovering someone from not being able to dress themselves or feed themselves, right? Mm-hmm. We're not talking about making someone normal. Let's just be real clear about that. And first of all, there's no such thing as normal, right? And even if there was, why would we want to make people normal?
Yeah,
what a boring world.
Yeah,
right?
Nobody would want to be that.
Right. So, okay, so the science. It's an interesting thing because it actually goes all the way back to the very first major landmark study, the Lovaas 1987 study, where basically what they did was they showed that the kids that got 40 hours a week for 2 or more years of ABA, at the end of treatment were succeeding in regular education without any specialized supports, and they had IQ tests in the average range. And Lovaas called that outcome recovery. Well, actually, let's be clear on that. The outcome that he called recovery was kids who didn't need help anymore. They're doing fine in a mainstream situation. The only evidence that he had for that, though, was IQ tests and the fact that they were passing first grade, okay, without support, which is actually not bad. If you can pass first grade without support, that's pretty good test, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not easy to succeed in mainstream education, right?
Right.
But anyways, he didn't have the best measures scientifically. In fact, he didn't have any measures of actually, autism, right? Like autism symptoms. IQ is not a symptom of autism,
right.
And passing first grade is not a symptom of autism. So what he really needed to have was some direct measures of the symptoms of autism. So language, socialization, and maybe some like diagnostic measures. Back then, the research just wasn't there yet. And so he got a lot of criticism, actually, for using the word recovery. And since then, no mainstream ABA outcome researchers have dared use that word again, honestly, until very recently. And so multiple studies have been published since that study in '87. There's a study by Tris Smith and colleagues in 2000. There were several studies in 2005, 2006, 2007 by a variety of different researchers working in different countries, doing ABA therapy in different languages even. None of these people affiliated directly with Lovaas or UCLA. Producing this very similar results. They're not calling them recovery, though. They use other euphemisms for it. So, for example, sometimes they say rapid learners.
Okay.
But if you look at what is a rapid learner defined as, it's defined as a child who's succeeding in regular education with no supports, has IQ in the average range, has a diagnostic test saying doesn't qualify for an autism diagnosis anymore, has social skills tests in the average range, and Vineland scores, which is a overall composite of adaptive abilities in the average range. So in other words, give them every test you can think of, and they're doing fine. They don't present with any deficits, and they're succeeding in regular education, and they don't qualify for an autism diagnosis anymore. You can call that whatever you want, but I'm pretty comfortable with using the word recovery.
Right. And we need to be clear that those children all did qualify for an autism diagnosis in the beginning.
Of course.
So multiple studies showing that it's possible for children to get to this point where they don't need those other supports and they're functioning within normal, and they have no disability stopping them from doing what they want to do.
Exactly right. And Deborah Fine's research group at the University of Connecticut has been very active in this area as well. And what her and her graduate students have been doing is systematically taking groups of kids who, in the community, the parents or somebody claims, yeah, my kid recovered, and they give them every test imaginable you can think of. And then they take another group of kids with really high-functioning autism, like let's say kids with Asperger's or PDD-NOS with normal or superior IQ, okay? And then they give them all the same tests. And then they give a group of typical kids, same age, give them all the same tests, okay? And then what they do is compare those scores to see which ones are different and the same. And what they found was kids who had recovered are indistinguishable from the typically developing kids on all of those tests, okay? And these tests are given by blind raters, people who have no interest in the study, they have no idea which group the kids belong to. They're giving an objective test, and they look the same. Now they compared the kids who are recovered to the kids who still have high-functioning autism, and they showed that, yeah, they're not the same. They're a little bit different. The kids in the high-functioning group are doing pretty darn well, right? They got a lot of language. Their IQ is doing good, but they still have definite social deficits and presence of repetitive behavior. They're not the same as the recovered group, okay? Then they also compared the high-functioning, still has autism group to the typical group, and again, found a difference between those. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Now, the really exciting thing that they did is they went back and reviewed the charts, the original diagnostic charts, original records of all of those kids, and compared them, again, blind, okay?
Right.
And so they compared the ones who still have high-functioning autism to the ones who recovered, and tried to see, are there any differences in their diagnostic situation at intake, like when they first started treatment, and they couldn't tell the difference between those two groups. In other words, the kids who had recovered were the same as the kids who still had high functioning when they started, right? And so in other words, these folks who recovered did have autism, and it was verifiable. It was very clear that yes, indeed, they did qualify for a diagnosis. And these judgments were made not by people who do ABA treatment. These are researchers completely outside of ABA. In fact, they're not even mentioning ABA in this article, which is a little bit annoying to me, but whatever, But all they're doing is just documenting that yes, indeed, recovery from autism exists. And they've done enough studies now where it's not really reasonable to question it anymore. The more interesting questions these days are, what treatment produces it the fastest? How can we get more kids to recover? How can we predict which kids are going to recover? Not does it exist or not. That, honestly, from a scientific perspective, it's pretty clear now it's not reasonable to argue against recovery anymore.
Remarkable. I feel like I have an even better understanding, and I've heard you talk about this before, but I got even more information, and it makes me very excited because it shows us what's possible.
Absolutely.
What's possible. All right, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to see if we can have Dr. Tarbox. I might have a follow-up question, but we're also going to see if he can answer a couple of the questions that you guys have been writing in, so stick with us.
The Institute for Behavioral Training provides courses in applied behavior analysis for the treatment of autism. Access IBT e-learning videos on the move and learn at your own pace.
Talk a little bit about intensity of
IBT e-learning makes any location your classroom on the go.
So our objectives for today are to really learn what is autism and how is it diagnosed.
Get professional guidance with IBT face-to-face training. IBT face-to-face training courses prepare you to effectively implement ABA-based interventions. Choose between small group and one-to-one instruction. Earn BCBA supervision hours via one-to-one video conferencing.
So I had a chance to review your BIP today. You know what? It looked really good. You did a good job with it.
IBT continuing education courses. Earn credit through webinars, conferences, article reviews, and e-learning videos. You can learn more at ibehavioraltraining.com. IBT, 360 degrees of ABA training.
Here we go. Welcome back to Autism Live. We have with us wonderful Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. I was going to call you Dr. Adel Najdowski for a second, and clearly you are not her. But in any case, Dr. Tarbox is here with us. He just gave the most eloquent explanation of science, the science behind actual recovery from autism. But he brought something up during the break that I wanted to make sure that we gave him a chance to address, because it's very near and dear to my heart as well, is that recovery is not the only viable outcome for doing ABA therapy. And so if you would take a couple of seconds to say what that means.
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity, because oftentimes when we talk about recovery at CARD, and we do talk about it significantly, is folks who maybe have children who are older and did not have the opportunity to recover, or maybe are thinking, you know what, I love my child the way he is. Why are you telling me, like, why would you want to make him something other than who he is, right? And again, I'd like to make it really clear that recovery is one possible outcome of an early intensive ABA treatment. So if a kid has an ASD diagnosis and starts intensive treatment 30 to 40 hours a week before the age of maybe 3 to 4 in that area, and continues that intensive treatment for at least 2 years, maybe even up to 3 or 4 years, one possible outcome is recovery, as we defined it earlier. We still don't know exactly what the percentage of kids are that are going to make that outcome. It looks like it's about half, maybe just under half, maybe a third to a half, but we're not totally sure on that scientifically. But that's one possible outcome. There's lots of other outcomes, and recovery is only one. It's not the only legitimate outcome, right? It's not like either you fixed the problem or you didn't, right? We're not saying that autism is bad and we're trying to get rid of it. We're not saying like either you get rid of autism and that's good, or you're bad. Some people seem to think that the concept of recovery implies that, but honestly, it's a really overly black and white way of looking at it, and it's not reality. What we're saying is that's one possible outcome, okay? But the worst case scenario, if you get top quality treatment, is you learn lots of skills, and you become a more independent person who's able to determine their own life to a greater degree, right? You can communicate more. You're toilet trained. You have less challenging behaviors. You're able to play more, better leisure skills, make friends, have more fun, and be more independent in life. That's the goal of ABA treatment, right? And if you really take that out to the nth degree, the end point of that, of all of that treatment and skills training, is recovery for some kids. And for the rest of the kids, it's not, but it's maximization of individual human potential. So it's basically saying, like, how far can I get my kid in terms of independence and communication and leisure skills and all of that? How far can I push the development of those skills? So it's...
If you think about it, for those of you at home, our topic this week was autism acceptance. And this goes hand in hand with all of that. We're accepting our individuals in our lives for who and what they are, but we're helping them to achieve whatever is important and significant to them.
Absolutely.
That's what acceptance is really about.
Absolutely. And I always go back to like the Olympic athlete training analogy because I think it's useful and it's something people can kind of grasp onto. But of course, like an Olympic athlete, you'd like to get a gold medal, right? That would be great. But and so what are you going to do? You're going to do years and years of hard work and training, right? Just like ABA, years and years of hard work and training. But does it mean you failed if you didn't get a gold medal? Of course not. It means that you did a whole bunch of training and you gave it your best shot and you maximized your potential. You really dug deep to see what's the most I can get out of this 2 to 4 year period of my life in terms of developing these particular skills. It's exactly the same thing. Just because you didn't get the gold medal, it's not the end of the world. I mean, the same thing. You're going to need to accept, like, this is who I am. These are my strengths. These are my limitations, and I'm going to just give it my best shot, and that's all there is to it.
And I think parents have different philosophies when they start therapy. I know when we started ABA, it was because we'd heard that recovery was possible, and that was what we wholeheartedly want for our son. And we worked really hard towards that goal, and it was always when he recovers. And the phrase that we started saying was he's recovering from autism. That was the way we decided to phrase it. And our son is not recovered. In this moment in time, I can tell you that as the parent who's there, my son does not fit the criteria. He gets closer all the time, and I don't know that there's not going to be some day that I'm going to come in here and say, you know what, I now consider my son recovered. I think we get closer every day. I don't know that it will ever happen, and it isn't my be-all, end-all anymore. Because my focus, it's very interesting to me, my focus is really about just making sure that as many obstacles are removed as possible. It may be that we get to that medal someday where I look at him and I go, okay, I really don't think you need any more support. But in the meantime, I can tell you from where I sit how meaningful it is that we are where we are. And that and how fortunate I consider us to be. And I have friends whose children need more support than my child needs. They're very grateful that they are where they are because we're not at the point where I can walk down the sidewalk with my child now. And I can have a conversation with him. And on the first day, neither one of those things were possible. So, it's all perspective, right? Which we all struggle with.
That's right. And frankly, how many of us are completely satisfied with our lives? Us and the typically developing population. Are we all millionaires with supermodel wives and the best job in the world, right? Like we all look like Brad Pitt or something? Like that's just not life, right? It's all a matter of degree, and it's all a matter of just making life as awesome as possible with the cards that we're dealt, right? And have fun, love each other, support each other, and get the most out of life.
Absolutely. So going to this idea of making the most of those years and like an Olympic training, we had a question that came in that somebody said, my son is almost 4 and starting ABA soon, but how do I get 30 to 40 hours of ABA if he's in school for 6.5 hours? They do not provide ABA at the school here in South Florida for pre-K. I think a lot of people go, when you hear that 30 to 40, you go, oh, how on earth are we going to do that?
Right.
How on earth are we going to do that?
Yeah.
And especially when you've got to compete with school. But Dr. Tarbox, what do you say to that?
Right. Okay. So the classic model with ABA, early intensive ABA, is you put the child in mainstream settings when he or she is able to be successful in those settings. And so typically we do full-on 30 to 40 hours a week in the home or in a specialized treatment center or specialized treatment ABA school, wherever it is, but an intensive ABA setting until the child develops the skills where they're able to be successful and actually learn from more mainstream settings. So if the child's able to sit still, pay attention to the teacher, observe peers, imitate peers, and some basic functional communication, some basic play skills, then they might be ready to start interacting more with other kids and learning from other kids and the teacher. If the child's not there yet, honestly, they're not going to be learning much in a regular education placement. And so your listener needs to take a long, hard look at that and really think, what are my goals? What is my child ready for? And get an expert ABA supervisor to help you figure out those decisions and help you make that determination. Now, it's entirely possible that, and of course, since we don't know this child, it's entirely possible that he does have those skills where he is ready to actually learn and succeed in a mainstream placement. If that's the case, you might want to seriously consider, is a full day placement the best option? Or might it make more sense to do a half day, say 9 to 12 or 12 to 3 or something like that, and then use the rest of the daytime hours to help get those 30 to 40 hours in? So it's all a juggling act, and it's all a balancing act. But what I can say with absolute certainty from a scientific perspective is getting those intensive hours in for at least 1 to 2 years is your best shot at maximizing your child's outcomes.
There you go. And you've heard it from somebody who would know. Now, on the flip side of that, as a parent, I will say to you that be careful, because schools are very good at presenting themselves as experts in education.
Sure.
And they are experts in educating, but a lot of times they're experts at educating completely neurotypical children. And the gap for educating children with autism, some people now in education systems understand that, but more don't yet.
Right.
They don't have the right training. But and some of them don't even know that they're not experts in it.
Right.
So they will present themselves to you as an expert, and in fact they're not.
And
So
let's just be honest, they're human beings too, and most humans don't really want to admit when they're not experts.
Right.
It's kind of tough to sit around a table and admit, I don't really know what to do with this kid.
Right. And they've been doing things a certain way for a certain amount of time. But they're going to tell you that the best place for your child is going to be in their environment.
Right.
And their motive might be completely pure, that they believe that that's the best place for your child. But administrators will tell you that's the best place for your child also because there's a monetary amount that comes with your
Based
child
on
being
enrollment,
there. Right? And you always need to know if people are making the decision based on how much money it is for them, right? We need to be aware of that. So I would just second what Dr. Tarbox said about take a long, hard look about what does your child need this year and who's going to best give it to you. It might mean that you rearrange your life. It might be that it's more convenient for you because you're working a job and your child needs to be at that preschool, but maybe there's an autism center that does one-on-one ABA in that case, that your child can be at that center and get, because that first year when my son was 3 and they were telling me that my son had to be at a 6.5-hour school and he was going to be there and that was going to be great, and I fought tooth and nail for him to be in a 40-hour program in our home one-on-one. And honestly, I mean, the fight of my life that year to get that year, because I was convinced from what I had heard and what I had seen that was going to be crucial for him, and I didn't know. I always would sit there and say, if I only had a crystal ball and I could look into the future. I eventually saw my crystal ball. I saw a kid that was in the same early intervention program before I started ABA, had similar symptoms as my son, and you can never compare children, right? You really can't. But a year later, I saw that child coming from the preschool and saw my son, and let me just tell you, that year at home made all the difference.
Yeah, and quite honestly, the research is pretty clear on just sort of standard treatment as usual, special education type classrooms for kids with autism don't produce gains, and I'm sure we could use some more research on that, but the research that's available so far that's published shows they don't generally produce gains.
Yeah. And so I encourage you to have an expert, a true expert, not somebody somebody at the school who has something to gain look at your child and give you an idea. Now, so from 3 to 4, my son stayed home, and the school was offering us the lowest possible placement, a room that I went into, and there literally were children with helmets hitting their head against the wall. That's what they thought was appropriate for my nonverbal child at the age of 3. He did that 40 hours at home, and a year later they offered him complete inclusion in a neurotypical preschool. I still was dragging my feet on that, but at that point, our experts said, you know, he needs this for the social. So at 4, he went, but he was ready. If he had done that at 3, he would never have been in that classroom.
That's right.
And honestly, he would never have started kindergarten on time.
And it honestly doesn't depend on the age. It depends on the skill development level.
Right.
That's really the critical factor. You could be a 10-year-old who's honestly not ready to learn from other people because you don't observe other people, you don't imitate, you don't know how to follow instructions yet or pay attention yet. And those are pivotal foundational skills that if you don't have those, you're not really ready to learn in a classroom environment.
And yes, it's so important for us to remember this is not a one-size-fits-all. You need to look at your individual child and with the criteria that Dr. Tarbox was talking about, and have an expert look at your child to say this is what's right now. It may be that social interaction is essential, or it may be that you really need that year at home.
But let me also interject that simply placing the child into a mainstream setting or even a group special ed setting without engineering that setting to help maximize the child's skill development doesn't work. So, you know, let's say you do the first year of great high quality ABA, your child builds a whole bunch of foundational skills, and now you throw them in an unsupported, you know, group setting. Your child's not going to be able to just do all of those skills. They still need support. And so a one-to-one aide might be necessary, or maybe a teacher's aide who's trained, but your ABA professional should be in charge of that process, or at least be contributing to that process, so that they can systematically make a plan for how everything your child learns in the ABA program can be generalized and actually applied in a realistic and practical way in the more natural setting.
And thank you for saying that, because we did have that. When my son went to that inclusion classroom, he went with a card aid. And honestly, that has made all the difference. Well, I thank you so much for being here.
It's always a pleasure.
You always add so much to this dialogue and expand my head. And I know everybody else's as well. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to take a break and let Dr. Tarbox go. But we're going to be back to finish out the show and deal with some of the other things that you guys have written in. So stick with us.
Hi, I'm Ryan with Autism Research Group. We study ways to improve the lives of kids with autism. One of those ways is teaching safety skills, such as what to do if they get lost. We hit the streets to find out if anybody knows the correct answer on how to teach a kid what to do if they get lost. You're teaching the child
what to do if they get lost.
Yeah, you're trying to make them independent so they have the skills.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, give them a compass. Code name's good idea. Centurion.
We always have this whistle.
Oh, I'd also tell the kid, don't get scared. You're gonna be all right, man. This is just the world. This is planet Earth. You're at home here. As long as you're on planet Earth, you're at home.
As long as you're on planet Earth, you're home. This guy's a genius. With that flawless logic, he just solved our homeless problem. And as for the unique sounding whistle, although very cool, it'll probably only work if you're in close proximity. And a compass?
I have her call me.
Yeah, she doesn't have a phone. Parents are like, you're too young, you don't need a phone.
Establish some sort of like meeting place.
What if they can't find a meeting place? Because sometimes the kids get nervous when they get lost.
Yeah.
So like a backup plan,
Well,
plan B.
Yeah, I don't know. No, not really.
Let them go and find a new kid.
Yeah, I got a different one. Yeah.
There's not much you can do.
There is stuff you can do.
Like...
That's right, there is stuff you can do. In 2012, myself, along with my colleagues, Dr. Jonathan Tarbox and Dr. Adel Najdowski, published a study in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis on teaching kids what to do when they get lost. The study demonstrated how 3 simple things, rules, role-playing, and praise, were effective in establishing these help-seeking behaviors. The benefit of this method is it doesn't require the child to have a cell phone or to have to locate a meeting place, which might be difficult if they're in a place like Disneyland. So once again, our method included rules, role-playing, and praise. Let's head back outside and learn about some of these rules.
They should yell out loud. Can't find my mom, help me.
Maybe yell out and scream for help.
All right, scream really loud.
Correct.
And if that doesn't work, then
I don't know.
Well, they could seek help from someone.
Find an adult.
Go to a vendor, you know, and say I'm lost.
Find an adult, like a police officer or a fireman or an employee in the store, and tell them, and maybe they can help you contact your parent. It really is that simple. You don't need to get your kid a cell phone. You don't need to establish a meeting place that they might not be able to find when they're lost and panicking. And you definitely don't need to give them a compass. All your kid has to do is 3 things. First, yell mom or dad real loud. 2, if that doesn't work, find an employee. And then 3rd, tell the employee they're lost. If they can't locate an employee, then tell them to find a mother with children, because that's probably the safest person to approach. I'm not saying that most men are predators, but most predators are men. That is a fact. I've read it in a fortune cookie. All right, so you've gone over the rules with your kid, and you've quizzed them, and they're able to tell you the correct responses so they understand the rules. But is that enough? How do you know they're going to perform correctly in a real-world setting? You need to get out there and find out if they can actually do it. So you'd go over the rules and tell them, like, do this, do that, but how would you know if they actually knew what to do? If you wanted to shoot a basketball, and I just told you, oh, when you shoot a basketball, do this, this, and this.
I never practiced.
You never practice, yeah, so it don't matter how many times we go over the rules or how well you can repeat them back to me. It's not going to change until you get on the court and practice.
Maybe do like a, a little skit with them.
Like a role play?
Role play, yeah.
Your child, you're lost in the toy aisle.
Okay.
What do you do? I'm an attendant walking around.
I'm lost, I don't know where my mom is.
And then once you practice, you just like praise them, give them feedback, like, good job, you did it.
Reinforcing it.
Yes, this woman wins the prize for best comment. She pointed out the most important part of learning, reinforcement. Now, in our study, we used praise, but for your kid, you might have to use something else. You might have to buy them a treat, a toy, take them to their favorite restaurant where they can eat unhealthy food, and run around and climb through plastic tunnels that have the unmistakable scent of urine, and then play games, spending $20 to get a plastic little spider ring that they will eventually lose in a ball pit. The point is, you need to reward your child for correctly demonstrating what you've been teaching them.
Okay, I'm gonna call her. So, hello, your child, Ryan Autism is missing. There you go.
Woohoo!
Yay!
So you tested it out
I'll
in the
try.
store to make sure I knew it. I had the rules,
Yes.
we role played it, and you made sure I knew it, and then like you said, good job, and all that. Now we're good to go.
We're good to go.
All right.
Done?
High five right there.
Yeah.
So there you have it. Give your child the rules, get out there and practice, and reward your child for responding correctly. For more information, please visit us online at autismresearchgroup.org. I'm Ryan Bergstrom. Thanks for watching. Yes, ding. No. Yes, this woman wins the first. Yes, this woman. Yes, this woman wins the best. Yes, this woman wins the first place. Yes, this woman with. Why can't I say woman? Yes, this woman wins. What's the line? Yes!
Welcome back to Autism Live. I want to take a couple of seconds to, somebody had written in, I don't know whether the time thing is just longer today. It's just taking longer for the satellite. Who knows? But I'm sorry we didn't get to read this while Dr. Jonathan Tarbox was here. Somebody wrote in and said, yeah, and then you have some people who claim not to want to cure for their child or for their child to be recovered because they love their child just the way they are. Well, I love my child just the way he is too, but you bet your you-know-what, I want a cure or a recovery. It does not mean I love him any less or any different. I want the best for my son, period. Here's the irony in all of this is that I feel like if we were to all be in one room and everybody were just like, you know, to put all emotion aside and keep boiling it down, and that we could have individuals who are on the autism spectrum, parents of kids who are on the spectrum, you know, everybody all in one room. And if we boiled it all down, I think we would all say that. But the words that we use sometimes make somebody else go, you can't say that because that offends me, or this hurts my feelings, or it's, you know, when you say that, it makes me feel like you want to wipe me out. It's words, and words are powerful, and I love words, but sometimes they hurt. And I'm with you though. I want what's best for my child. I want to give him every opportunity. I want to be the cheerleader on the side who's telling him that he can, and I don't ever want to give up on any child. I think that that's a crime. the biggest crime that there is. So, you know, some people use the word recovered and some people say accelerated learners. I don't know what the answer is. And in my work on trying to be accepting, I'm trying to accept, because there are some words that you could use to me and I would go, oh, right? And it would hurt. So I'm trying to accept that some words hurt other people and find other words. You know, I don't know that it's working yet, but I don't want to spend all my time on that when I could spend time on helping my child and helping another child, if that makes sense. So, you know, we do what we can, but I think absolutely it's important. It's important for us to do the best for our kids. Now, somebody else just wrote in, do I go with a specialized preschool with school district or private? My son is 4 and they want him there a full day. He copies and copies what they say. Other kids, he copies what they say and do. He doesn't initiate much at school, though he does talk at home. I am pushing them for VPK inclusion, but they want him in an autism cluster. He does have problems with attention, but can sit, but not sure if he is a wallflower. Okay, so I'm assuming this is the same parent that was writing in before. And I'm sorry that Dr. Tarbox has had to leave. But again, you know, even with the information that you've provided there, it's such an open-ended question because it depends on the preschool and it depends on the child. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know if you've started your ABA yet, but if you've already got an ABA provider that you trust, I would be looking to them and saying, what's going to be the best possible outcome for my child at this point? As Dr. Tarbox was saying, it doesn't have to be as black and white as he either goes to school and he stays full day or he doesn't. Schools don't like that. They don't like it if you send a child for half day or if you don't send them every day. In the beginning for that pre-K that I sent my son to, it was a 5-day and it was a half day. And I was only letting him go 2 days a week. I said, that's what we're going to do because I want to be doing the ABA at home. And the school really didn't care for it. It wasn't their favorite thing. But we did that for like a month, and then Card had been in the school and we'd had the aide there, and he said, I got to be honest, I think that being here this amount of time would be better for him because he needs to generalize those skills that we've taught him at home, and the best place for him to generalize is in this environment. But he'd already seen the school and he knew my child, and so he could give me that information and I could make an informed choice. That was my individual child. For your child, you know, it really is going to depend on what these different classrooms look like. But if your goal is to maximize the year, I would get some help to evaluate it with you. And then know that you can start with one thing and you can keep changing. Schools like to tell you, no, this is what we're doing. This is how we do it. Here's the cookie cutter. And I have a gesture for that, but we won't show it here, right? You know, because it's like, well, that's your rule. A friend gave me a pin a long time ago that said, your silly rules don't apply to me. And that's how I feel as an autism parent. I'm like, well, that's your rule. That's how it works for you. Nobody said that works for everybody. And usually the laws are such that our kids don't have to go to pre-K. We know that pre-K for some children is a great thing and it preps them for kindergarten, but it's not for everyone. So I would ask you to step back and say, I'm not considering what the school wants. They can want what they want, right? That's what they want. What do I want for my child? What do experts in autism who have looked at my child and know my child think is going to be the best thing? And then go back to the school and say, okay, so here's what I want to do. How are you going to make it work? They want your child. And I'll tell you why they want your child, for 2 very good reasons. I mean, the teacher may want your child because your child is fabulous and wonderful and brilliant, but the administrators want your child because it's money for them. They get funding based on how many actual butts they have in chairs. And if they're providing you with a program, then you can't go to them and ask them for money for the program, for some other program someplace down the road. And that is where the money is. When my child stayed home in that year, the school had to pay a portion of that. Right? They would have rather that they made money than paid money out. It's simple economics. So let them talk and just dial them down. It's like the wop, wop, wop from Charlie Brown. Dial them down and consider what you want. Usually when I talk to parents and I say, what does your gut say? What's your gut saying? Do they need to be at school or do they need to be at home? And usually that's where we start, because a parent's gut is usually in the ballpark. Maybe it needs to be tweaked a little bit by the experts. Maybe, you know, a fear has to be quieted, but usually you're in the ballpark. So that would be my advice on that. Now, we had a couple of other people, somebody who wrote in about what Dr. Najdowski had said about, love to watch your show. How do you help a 4-year-old with attending? My son cannot tell me about his day at school, even if I'm specific and ask, who did you play with or what did you do on the playground? All he says, I played at school every day. We've only got a quick amount of time, and I want to tell you what we did for my son when he was coming home and not having something to tell me. And you can morph it to work for your child in your circumstance. We went to the teacher and the aide and said, we're trying to get him to remember one thing. So we set up a circumstance, something would happen, the aide would then comment on it to my son and say, wow, what just happened? Have him repeat it right then. She would like make a little visual for him on the page. He would have that on a little piece of paper. He would come and she would write what happened on the back, like in cursive, so that he couldn't necessarily, he'd come home and I'd say, what did you do at school today? And I would be able to look at her piece of paper and be able to prompt him and say, did you play with Joey? Tell me about it, and show him the picture that she drew to prompt him to be able to tell me. And then gradually we faded all of that so that when he comes home now, I say, so what happened at school today? And he knows he's got to be able to tell me at least 2 things or he's not going to get access to the video games. And by the way, we built in that when he answered the questions and I prompted him, that he got the treat of being able to play and do what he wants to do. So you work up to it, though. You don't automatically say, well, he's just going to come home and tell me something. You got to give him some visuals. You got to give him some help. Get the teacher involved, because otherwise you don't even know what to ask, right? Get the teacher involved, get the aide involved, have them do a visual, and start with one little thing. And once they're able to do that, reinforce it big, and then you can add other things as well and fade the prompting. That's how it worked with my son. We also had a question about how to get a kid to school with anxiety. We're going to have to save that for next week, but I encourage you to look at cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety. Deal with the anxiety, especially in the teen years. It can be disabling, but we'll save that for Dr. Grandpichet next week to give a full answer on that, but I don't want to leave you hanging all weekend long. We're out of time, but ladies and gentlemen, Eustacia Cutler, Temple Grandin's mother, is going to be with us on Tuesday on the phone, and you can be asking questions. I need your questions in the next 24 hours, so send them off to us. You can put them on our Facebook. We're out of time, but thanks to everybody for today, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.